And welcome into another edition of Spits and Suds. So glad to have you. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. And as we talked about last night on the postgame with David Castillo, joining us is the longtime voice of your Dallas Stars. Now he is putting out some terrific info on his Substack, which you can subscribe to, and I would encourage it. Some terrific articles he's posting, some about today's Stars in NHL, and also some great stories from the past. It's called Ralph Stack. It's been an enjoyable ride. You can also follow him on Twitter/X at Ralph Strangis. How are you, my man?
Good. And so I guess let's introduce Ralph Strangis, the former voice, the former face, here I am. The current, I'm not even sure, but yeah, here I am. Thank you, Gavin. It's good to be back.
No, absolutely. I love having you on throughout the year. And the first thing is I took a step back after the post show last night and I said, maybe on the podcast, I didn't express it enough as far as getting 6 points. But then as Pete DeBoer mentioned after the game, 3 games in 4 nights, not to mention a back-to-back against 3 division opponents. Really impressive.
Yeah, that's a tough stretch for them. And, my 2 teams, as you know, are the Dallas Stars and the Minnesota Vikings. And the Vikings just went out and won 3 on the road.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that it's like the first time in 3 or 4 years that a team had done that, had won from the NFL, had won 3 on the road. The road is different. And then you always have that letdown when you come home. And so, again, the metaphor, like the Vikings on Sunday, you could see they were flat in the first half against Arizona. Then they came back. The Stars, it's always like when you're tracking stuff to bet, that 3rd game in 4, that 4th game in 6 nights, all of those things, that's the stuff you kind of look at. And that's when you need your backup, especially for the Stars like last night, what DeSmith did in Utah last night. That has to happen. I just did a quarter poll update on the Dallas Stars, and one of the metrics that they're behind on is backup wins. And you have to have between 12 and 16 wins or 18 wins from your backup in order to be where you want to be. Last year, they got 16 out of Wedgwood. When you look at teams who are high seeds or who usually are, in the mix for big runs, it's a team that has a backup goalie with about, 14 or 15 wins. It's got to be part of it. And DeSmith only had 2, I believe, going into last night. That was his 3rd. So, they're going to need more of that. And last night they got it. And in a short span like that, you have to have the goaltending.
It's really similar to, you mentioned NFL as far as running backs, where you no longer can have one. It's 2 running backs sharing the load. And the days of Marty Brodeur and Dominic Hasek are long past. And the backup goaltender is not only it's a vital position as far as picking. Like, that is a big win for this organization as far as, going into Utah. That's a fast Utah team. Obviously, they had a lot of high-scoring quality chances. And DeSmith looked terrific. It was a great bounce-back game. So I think it gives the team a lot of confidence knowing that when he's in the net, everything's going to be okay, because he's really proven to be a terrific backup in the NHL, with a number of teams. So it's it's obviously a 4-point swing being in the Central Division. So there are, so many good things to take out of last night. And, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is that I like about this Stars team. Some days, Ralph, we're talking about the kids. We're talking about Wyatt Johnston. We're talking about Rope Hintz. And then last night we get the KG veterans in Dadonov and Benn coming up big.
Yeah, and that's really, the Stars can beat you or hang in a game a variety of different ways. Again, going back to my Vikings thing, it's the same thing. Good teams have kind of a mix and a balance of veteran leadership, top-end skill. Sometimes the skill is young, sometimes it's a little bit older. But last night, and I'm a Big Daddy guy now, right? I mean, he's become one of my favorite players. Too. And when he got hurt, was it last spring?
Yes.
When did he get hurt?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, that was tough on, like, that puts some stress on the machine with him not being in there, because he can, he's one of those guys that can kind of slot up and down where you need him. And if you put him in and you ask more of him, he generally gives it to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's and as we've said, you have to have those things so that when things happen, like Wyatt's not scoring and Robertson's not scoring and these things, the veterans know. You don't have to tell them twice. Okay, so I got to do a little bit more and I got to do this, but I can't cheat and I can't, so that's why we have those guys. And then again with this team, and I don't really know what's going on with Tyler and that's going to mean for the year in terms of health, his load management, his, trying to be ready for when they need him the most. But right now they kind of need him the most, right? That line has just carried this team through the first quarter of the season. So they got enough. Their depth is usually the biggest thing you want. They have it. And especially as we were speaking about those quick turnarounds, those 3 games in 4, those 4 games in 6, you have to have some depth. You can't be afraid to pull guys in and out. And that's always been the trick, because coaches generally, when push comes to shove, I need the 2 points tonight, damn it, I'm not taking them out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and that's what always happens.
Yeah.
So, and Pete's a little stubborn. I mean, I watched that last year, watching him with Pavelski in the playoffs. That was, to me, as much as any reason why they had trouble last year. He would not scratch him. He would not reassign him. He would not take his minutes away. And I understand it, but there's a point at which you got to look at the hard evidence and say, I got to make a hard decision here. That's what they're paying big money to do. So that's the one. And I kind of keep watching DeBoer for that. Like, how stubborn is he going to be over some of this stuff? The power play too, right? Yeah. How stubborn is he going to be with this?
Well,
I don't know.
That's very interesting, because he is so close with assistant coach Steve Spott, and the dedication of Spott sticking with DeBoer wherever they go. Their families are so close, and just that power play has just been, we talk about the Stars being tired against Edmonton in the Western Conference Finals, and certainly that could be a factor. But then when you look at the power play statistics, that was massive in that series, and it seems as though it's carried over, and maybe it is the loss of Pavelski, although Pavelski, you're right, the tank went on empty. The one thing I will say about DeBoer that's interesting, Ralph, that you've kind of seen as well, is that scratches to players like Dumba, whereas he's keeping Nils Lundqvist, and Nils Lundqvist was the easy pull for them. It didn't look like when Nils Lundqvist re-signed with the Stars, there were a lot of question marks, like, wait, what's going on? How is this guy that basically you refuse to play? In fact, you called up an AHL defenseman to replace him in the playoffs, and Petrovic all of a sudden is getting another contract, but he's proven you can't take him out of that top 6 defensively.
No. And again, it's the Dumba thing, right? I don't think it's fair to say nobody expected that Dumba wasn't going to be an everyday player.
Yeah.
Right. Like that he wasn't going to come in and slot in and, okay, he's on our top pair, maybe our second pair. He's going to fill this void and that, and he hasn't done it. Right. So certainly not to the level that will keep him in there every night.
Right.
Coaches are funny animals, man. You want to believe in the people you trust to help you get through the tough times. And sometimes that means you're not going to get through the tough times because you believe too much in the people you trust. Right.
Yeah.
So, the power play's they've got to work that out. I just had a piece in Substack this week, my Substack, Ralph Stack, about the Stars at the quarter pole. And that when you look at where they are with so many things, the only 2 things that were really problems to me, because everything else is going to get worked out. Robertson's going to feel better. He's going to work through this, whatever this rehab is, because that's probably still a thing. Those things linger, and he's going to be fine. And Wyatt's going to find the net again, and that's what happens. But the 2 things that really jump out to me are backup goaltending. You have not gotten enough out of that position, and then a power play. Those are the 2 things right now. If I'm looking at the Dallas Stars, I'm saying, okay, this concerns me greatly as I'm moving into the year. So because with DeSmith, a lot of times, if your backup isn't performing, you just cancel starts for him and you don't even say anything to people, right?
Yeah.
So this management of how many games do we want Oettinger to play and what is that going to look like? Well, that can change. And if it changes without anybody knowing it, that Pete and those guys are in there going, gee, I don't know, then you don't see as many starts as you might have. And the whole thing starts to get some more stress on it. So that's a good sign last night that DeSmith was ready to go, and maybe that'll give him some confidence to go back to him.
And as you mentioned, Jake Oettinger, when we last spoke, you rightfully so, I think, brought up some question marks about Jake, and he certainly has responded and had a terrific year. I never played the position, Ralph, but I know enough to know that the positioning of the goaltender is vital. The calmness around the net, he just seems as though healthy, and the game's looking really good right now. And I'm sure it is tough if you're DeBoer to work on that load management when you have a guy that's right now playing in the top 5, 6 in the league.
Yeah, why would you put the other guy in if you turn and you look at it and go, what I got? What's Jake doing on the bench? So there's all of that happens in your head. But my piece, which was the Stars have their $66 million man, but is Oettinger the guy to take him to the next cup?
Yeah,
mostly focuses on what happens in the playoffs with Jake, and that I think he's had subpar springs the last 2 years. And you can go and look at the post and see how I kind of chronicle that. But losing every first game of a series, going down 0-2 the first round. Again, I talk about stress. This stuff puts stress on a team that may not show up in the first round, but as you get deeper into the playoffs, you can't do it because you just put too much energy into it. Jake is exactly where we want him and where we all want him to be right now. For me, it's evaluating for him is going to be in the playoffs, really, because I went through this. I went through this with Marty. I went through this with Kari to some degree. Guys who were very, very strong at the position, but at the end of the day, we're backstopping a team that didn't get much done in the playoffs. Now, with Jake, they've won some playoff series. They've had some nice little pops, but they haven't won the cup yet. So, and I know until you do it, but
Sure.
That's the kind of stuff that I look at. So, for him, it's all going to be the spring, and let's let him win game 1 in the spring, and then maybe that'll give everybody feeling better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Jamie Benn with some late game great draws for puck possession, and I wanted to ask you, he's the captain, so obviously people know about Jamie Benn. I don't think they necessarily, when they're looking at the game as a whole, and he scored a goal, they don't really look at face-off draws and the importance of it, and that means puck possession. But he's been terrific inside the dot all year, and I was wondering, like, with all your years with the organization, some of those players that might not necessarily get the credit or be heralded like they should for doing the small things. I think Stu Barnes comes to mind as
that's
certainly,
very good. Yeah.
certainly one of them. Just guys in the past. I'll tell you another name that they picked up in a trade, Matthias Nordstrom, who just became back when there was that shutdown defenseman. Yeah.
Well, and the thing about Ben, though, is nobody's looking at that stat. With Stu Barnes, we were looking at that stat.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that had to be in his bag of tricks, right? Like, but for Stu Barnes Stu Barnes was not the run a guy over in front of the net and then beat the shit out of him guy, right? Yeah. Or put up big numbers. He had good numbers throughout his career, but Ben won an Art Ross, right? And Ben is supposed to be and is a top 6 scoring forward on this team. So sometimes when you get guys like that, like, I don't know if people really thought that much about Mike Modano's faceoff percentages, because most of the time in a tough draw, they'd slip Carbo in there or they put somebody else in there to kind of cover it when they have two centers on the ice. And so the first thing you don't think about is that. But Ben's didn't he have the 16 for 16 night this year?
Yeah,
or whatever
he did.
It was in the circle. Yeah. So James has been really good like that. And again, it's a case of a veteran knowing that, okay, I got to do everything. And especially after the last 2 springs, and this is all winding down now, right? I mean, Ben's coming down the hill. Tyler's coming down the hill. Jim Nill in some degrees is coming down the hill. This whole thing is winding down to what? Let's say, well, Ben's up after this year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think everybody's feeling it a little more than they were in the last couple of years. And I know Ben has to be because where he's at in his contract, where he's at in his career, I think he knows his buddy Tyler is trying to drag himself through at least this season, and who knows what's going forward. So I would say this season is an intense area of focus for Jim Nill and the Dallas Stars.
And you've covered 32 years young Matt Duchene and what he's doing. And I don't think he'll make the Four Nations Cup, Ralph, but certainly, a kind of a dark wild card. Canada's stacked, but the fact that he's even being talked about in circles and that line is so impressive. You've been around as far as doing games with Matt Duchene throughout his career, whether it was in Colorado or Ottawa or Nashville. What have you seen as far as him from the Dallas Stars and the biggest difference compared to other places that he's been?
He looks like he's having fun.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. He looks like he's really engaged here. I mean, every situation is sort of unique and different, but this one looks like it's just a great fit for him here. And I think it's another reason why he couldn't wait to get back here in Dallas. Right. So, and I think that's got a lot to do with it. The fit sometimes, especially because when you're young, you kind of go where they tell you and you got to play how they tell you and all of that stuff. And then he gets to Colorado, how many years ago? 4 or 5, 3, 4 or 5, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's there, but it's not, and he's there and he's doing stuff, but it just doesn't look like it's him. And now it looks like him again. This looks like Matt Duchene from 5, 6, 8 years ago. So it's getting the player in the right situation at the right time. And he understands what's going on here. I can't stress this enough. I really believe they think their window is right now. And I think if I was them, and I don't talk to anybody inside, not about hockey for sure, not about their team and personnel and all of that, but I would suspect there is immense pressure this year on everybody. And that's why veterans like Matt Duchene and Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn are really trying to lead this thing. And then you got the great Mush.
Yeah.
What the hell? What happened there?
I mean,
all of a sudden he's the best player in the world.
Yeah, I said it's almost bizarro world because it's the opposite of the Alexander Radulov contract, where the first year and a half, 2 years, you're like, this is the best. And then you saw Radulov's game fade. The first year of Mason Marchment, everyone was like, what a bad contract. Only had 1 year in Florida. So, I mean, was it a fluke that he had that year in Florida and then all of a sudden hooked up with Duchene and Seguin? I mean, it truly is interesting when a chemistry of a line clicks, how it can elevate your career.
And it's not like you can just throw 3 guys together and say, let there be chemistry.
Yeah.
I say this about booths all the time. You can't just put 2 people in a booth and say, let there be chemistry. And not to digress, but I thought, and for 100 reasons, Burkhardt and Greg Olson had really developed into a nice team and they had great chemistry.
I agree.
Well, now they've got to rebuild it with Brady, with all this other stuff that's going on. And it's different. It's really hard. I probably had 50 partners in the NHL over the years on different shows. And some of them like to work this way and some of them like to work that way. And some of them won't look at you before you go on. And some of them want to talk your ear off. And some of them want to run the show. And and it's just a lot of stuff. And I'm sure it's the same with the 3 lines with a line out there that, you get in a position now where your line mates fit together and you're having fun. There's nothing better in the world for these guys. And you can see the joy they play with. And that's very evident, especially that top line.
Well, let's go there for a second, Ralph, because one of the things you do on your Substack is that you talk about broadcasting, and I'm kind of a broadcasting nerd, being in the business.
Yes, I know that.
Having to evaluate talent. So one of the fascinating aspects, you mentioned Greg Olson, and they wanted to bring in, quote, that bigger name. And we see that. I'll give another comparison. TNT compared to ESPN's hockey coverage, where the bigger names with Subban and Messier, it just wasn't clicking, where you get a guy that had a really nice social following in Biz Nasty, Paul Bissonnette. You had Anson Carter with experience. And the first time I saw that TNT crew, I looked at the NBA TNT crew with Barkley and Shaq and Ernie, and you just say to yourself, wow, the person pulling the strings at TNT has a unique way of finding that chemistry. And I think sometimes, too often, the name, it blurs the line as far as how talented that person could be. Not that Brady's not talented, but Olsen, to me, had the makings of one of the best as far as being so young and being so smooth as far as a football announcer. So, I find what you said very interesting.
Yeah, and the other thing you have is you have corporate politics, which thank God I'm out of corporate politics, because that's evident in sports too. I mean, that's how this goes. But so at ESPN, it's so clogged over there, and their star system is, I mean, they work like network news. They just want stars. They don't care about any. They don't, that's kind of their number one. And they also have to, I guess, throw some crumbs. They throw a lot of big crumbs the way of Sports Center people. So you got Levy, who probably has in his contract, I have to do X many games. Sean, who probably, I don't know, are they still paying him for Monday Night Football? I don't know, but he has to do games. Levy has to do games. Buchagras has to do games. And then you get to the studio and you're like, well, Levy really wanted to do the studio, so we have to give Levy the studio. Okay, I guess it's Steve Levy in the studio. And well, Mark Messier's played in New York, and he owns some suits, doesn't he? Yeah, he does. Well, let's put him on the air. And that's a lot of times, and you can see this in every sport, how they just throw somebody over the top. And I wrote a piece this week for my Young Sports broadcast that people, executives in this game, don't know what they're watching. They really don't. They know what they like, but they don't know what they're watching. And I can tell you right away when I watch any broadcast of any pair that I've either seen or not seen before, how they get along, how they work together. Is the producer really producing a show here? Who's trying to carry it? And I think a lot of times they see these names and they see Tom Brady, and and they took it because they wanted the name and they wanted his market share. I don't think they need his market share. I think everybody who's a fan of Tom Brady is already watching the NFL.
Yeah.
And I also think he's taking a lot of criticisms because Olsen was really good and that team was really good and they were the number one team. And B, there are a million Tom Brady haters out there. And there have been Brady haters for a long time who don't say they're Brady haters, but they are. And now they're using this opportunity to crush him on social media or wherever, saying he's not ready to do this. Well, that's America, man. Like people just sit and wait for a stumble so they can throw rocks at him. I think Brady's been fine, but it takes time. This is not an easy job or an easy business. And I think the executives think it is, but it's not.
What I've always been fascinated, with the game of hockey, what I tell people that start to watch and they really want to get into the sport, I tell them, make sure whatever your cable or satellite provider is, that you're able to get Hockey Night in Canada. Because for some reason, and I don't know if it's Border Patrol, information that is in Canada somehow does not make its way. And I was fascinated if you kind of feel the same way. I mean, yeah, we have some insiders here and there, but like Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick, and you can go down the list as far as Canadians and Hockey Night in Canada with Ron McLean and Kevin Bieksa and just Kelly Rudy. And they just have announcers that get it and explain the game in a way similar to what happens here on Sundays with the NFL.
Well, but that's it, right? I mean, that's the culture. The culture here is NFL in the United States. When you watch the numbers on hockey now, it's kind of depressing. The salary cap has not kept pace with the other sports. The high salary has just been getting kicked in the teeth with respect to other sports. They're losing market share. Like, this is a real thing. And a lot of it is in Canada, man. It's the national sport.
Yeah.
This is it. They don't really care about Canadian football. They're not big baseball people. The NBA, yeah, whatever. Don't we have a team or two in there? I don't know. And but hockey is every village, every town, every province, everybody plays hockey. And so there's They just have that more in the bloodstream. And I think there's probably people, Gavin, in Canada that go, gosh, how come we can't get NFL insiders up here like Adam Schefter or Rappaport or, some of these guys? Because that's exactly what it is. And that's why I like what's happening at TNT so much, is they're not trying to retread. They're not trying to drag anything through it. They're looking for energy. And Liam is just great. He runs that panel perfectly. So, I would counter with, well, watch TNT, but also, you're going to have to do a little work if you want. You can follow Elliot on Twitter. I do that, and I look at his 32 thoughts every week or whatever it is, and all his he has scoops. He gets in there. He's a very good reporter, and so there's a lot of that there, but it's cultural. It's just a cultural difference is all. And I don't think they're trying to keep information from you, Gavin, but it is cultural.
Yeah. Before we get into looking at the LA Kings tomorrow night, because I have a few questions for you about the Kings, the Four Nations Cup, your thoughts? I think it's awesome for hockey that so many people are talking about the rosters. Clearly the All-Star game kind of, it was there, and the players would say they'd be honored, but it's one thing for the fans to be excited, but Ralph, the players just seem to be really amped for this.
Yeah, and that's, I guess I want to take a 10,000-foot view of this because the Olympics are kind of in this too. And I just saw Gary say that the plan is, Four Nations, then Olympics, then World Cup, then Olympics, and that, they want to keep staggering these events, and that it's not like, well, we're going to do this and not let players play in the Olympics. So that's really cool for the players, and it's cool for the fans. I've always had a problem taking my best assets out of my business and sending them someplace where I can't control them, and big injuries are a thing. And shutting ourselves down from any momentum we have in terms of the season of fans watching and sort of getting the hang of it. So it's a really tough line for me to look at those things. I always, I was never a big send the guys to the Olympics. And I'm not. And for the same reason that you have to shut everything down. There's only a few players that get to play. Your other guys are on break for 2 weeks, and they're professionals, but probably a week of that's in Cabo. And it just kind of messes up what should be the number one focus during a season. It's why, basketball at the Olympics can be played in the summer and their season is in the winter. So that doesn't really horse anybody up, and we're going to do that, and okay. And I wonder sometimes, and I know I'm not the first guy to say this, whether having the Olympics for hockey in the summer might not be the worst thing that we could do, because it would kind of let the NHL continue business as usual, because now you got games squeezed in on the other side of it and all of that. It's great spectacle. It's fun on TV. The players really get into it. But to me, and I know the fans aren't going to love what I say this, but to me, I think these things are big, big risks to your business, to your top assets, and to the flow of what you're trying, the continuity of a National Hockey League season. So, I'll watch. It'll be fun.
Sure. Sure. I'm also interested if, based on this, if they keep it to Four Nations or they figure out a way to form an international team that's not Sweden and Finland. Therefore, Draisaitl can play. Players like that.
Well, that's the other thing, right? So they're not really you're always going to leave somebody out with this stuff, and then you're going to say, well, wait. And I think sometimes even in hockey, because I wrote this the other day in my Devil's Dictionary stuff, that even anybody from the old USSR, even if they're not Russian, they're Russian to people in hockey. They don't make these distinctions between Czech and Slovak, and so what are we going to do with them if they don't have their own? And it's so that there's a lot of that too. It can be a big puzzle to put around. But I think the good thing about the NHL trying this is, okay, we're going to see how this goes.
Yeah.
And we're going to see what we want to do from there, and we'll make adjustments from there. And I don't expect that the format, this will completely carry over to the next time they do it. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, like I said, a Draisaitl, and that kind of brings me to someone that I know that you're extremely familiar with, and that, so I tell Stars fans, Ralph, that if you want to go see the Canadians, awesome. If you want to go see the Bruins, awesome. But every team has, 2 or 3 stars. And, if you want to see Ottawa, you're going to see a Kachuk. You're going to see a Stützle. You're going to see players like that. And like Carolina, if Sebastian Aho played for, let's say, the New York Rangers, how much more would we as a hockey community know Sebastian Aho? And that brings me to tomorrow night. 29 points, just keeps doing it. I don't think, and hockey people will say, no, of course, we know about Anze Kopitar, but
Yeah.
I just, does the hockey passive fan know, A, how good he is, how much of a point producer he is, how good he is defensively and on the draw? To me, this is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Absolutely.
Similar to Dirk, that played his whole career here, a cup winner. And I want to get your thoughts as a man who has covered Anze Kopitar. He's one of my favorite players in the league, and that's why you can hear it in my voice. I just don't think he gets his due.
Well, he's ageless, right?
Yeah.
And even though they, they did win 2 cups, 12 and when was it? When did they win? What were their years?
Yeah, it was every other year. That's when they were battling Chicago.
It was the Hawks. It was the Hawks and the Kings were switching up in the early teens or whatever it was. Yeah. So what happens in the NHL and what happens in sports overall is the people out east don't stay up late enough to watch the people out west. People out east have more representation in all the end of year awards and in deciding who's going to be on TV. We see this in the NFL. I mean, why do you think every analyst from the NFL has some tie to the New York market or played quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys? Other than that, they get locked on that. And it's no different in hockey, where all the focus goes to the East, and you can't get respect until you're up at the top, and then people start looking at you. So I would say about 10 years ago, people kind of really started talking about Anze. And then when they went down the hill again, people just went, oh, okay, well, it's just the Kings again, right? But I'll tell you a funny story. So when in 2016, 17, I got called in to do 4 games for the LA Kings for Bob Miller, who was going to be retiring. Well, me and 4 other guys, it was the limit. It was load management for Bob Miller. It was me and Gary Thorne and Chris Cuthbert and Jigs McDonald and
some great voices.
Yeah, it was fun. So I did 4 something. Everybody did 4. And then after All-Star, Bob had a stroke on All-Star Saturday, just right after I had done a game for them the week earlier, right before All-Star. And so I went in and they called me in and I finished the season for the Kings. I did the last 30 games or something for the Kings. Now, this LA Kings team had just been, cock of the walk, and a lot of their players, and they had gotten to the point where it becomes extremely militaristic when the hockey department takes over the operation. When you win, they do, and there's no access, and players don't want to talk to you in a lot of cases, and the clamps come up and all of that stuff. And so I went into LA. The only guy that was kind of my friend, my big friend, was Daryl Sutter, who would be fired at the end of that season. Daryl and I go way back. And but the rest of the players were kind of at arm's length the whole time. And I was a new guy, and who is he? And we've had a lot of different people in that seat on the airplane, and I don't need to talk to him. Well, one day I'm in the Kings room. I'm there for a couple of weeks, and I feel this tap on my shoulder. I turn around, it's Anze. And I go, hey, man, what's up? And he goes, you're Ralph. And I said, I am Ralph. And we had talked to each other before a little bit. And he said, how you doing here? I said, good. Everything going all right for you? And I said, oh, yeah. And he said, you called my first hat trick?
Wow.
And I, really? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, and I like your call better, so that's the one I listen to. So,
Oh.
yeah. So me and Ange, we're good. We're
Yeah.
good. But this is a kid, and most people don't know anything about Slovenia
Yes.
and how he came, how does a guy from Slovenia find his way to the National Hockey League? And so to me, he's such a good dude, but he's such a complete player. And he's not flashy, but boy, is he brilliant. And he's just a special player to watch. And when folks turn it on tomorrow night, you're going to see a guy who doesn't look, how old is he now? Is he 30?
You know what? Let me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
If
he's
only there were a way to
36.
look something like that up quickly. Yeah. Yeah. So I 30, I'm going to say 36. Is he?
37.
What is he? 37.
Just turned.
Okay.
Just turned.
Yeah. Just see. So you're going to see a guy that doesn't look 37, doesn't play 37. He's responsible all over the ice, but he can still create, as you just talked about. So, and the Kings are kind of an interesting team over there.
They are.
I so yeah, it's as much as things change, it's fun to see guys like that, who can hang with an organization and not just hang around and be a barnacle, but be a guy that says, no, we're going to be good this year too, because I'm going to make us good. And so, yeah, I love Anze. Yeah.
I don't think it's happened, but such a small country, I would love to see the Luka Doncic Kopitar sit down.
Right?
It's so amazing that a country that small could get one of the best in hockey, one of the best in basketball, and just talk about that. Because I bet if you went to Slovenia and asked, it'd be interesting. Probably Luka would win because of the international popularity of basketball, but obviously.
I don't know.
I know. It's very interesting.
I don't know. Yeah. Because Ange's the kind of guy too who everybody feels the same way about. Yeah. Luka is like, I love him, but right. And so, but Ange's not like that. I mean, he's the
Lady
kind of guy
Bing
that huh?
He's Lady Bing like.
Yes. Yeah. He's he's not going to upset anybody.
Right.
But it's an interesting country. I mean, you and I could, I don't know if we're of age, but we'd go fly over there and get free college if we wanted to.
Yeah.
So Slovenia is beautiful. I've been in the region. My great grandmother Anna Ambrovic was from the Slovenes, and it's a beautiful part of the world. And it's like, yeah, they're not in 12-lane rush hour traffic at 6 a.m. and have 300 emails waiting for them when they get to the office. Yeah. But boy, that's freedom. That's freedom, kids. So okay, I got it. Yeah, I got it. Hey, thank the Lord we all have freedom here.
Well, I want Stars fans to watch Kopitar tomorrow night, but Brandt Clarke is certainly proving that he's the young and up-and-coming defenseman. And, personally, I've always been a Doughty fan as well. I love his time on ice. He's always on the ice in big moments and stuff. And I know he's probably on the downside, just because of the number of years he's played and the minutes he's logged in the NHL. But just a terrific career for him as well.
Yeah, not the years, it's the mileage, right? Isn't that Indiana Jones? It ain't the years, it's the mileage. So, yeah, and he's had some hard miles and some hard. So he's beat up pretty good. That's another one. I mean, he's clearly more at the end than Kopitar is. But he's still, they still can roll him out there for big minutes. And, it's, where is that? Is that game in LA or
LA?
In LA, yeah.
Right. Tomorrow night it's in LA, and then they play Vegas Friday night, and then they're home for Calgary on Sunday, their first time seeing the Flames.
Calgary Flames. Yeah.
In fact, I
was going to go to Vegas, but I have a house guest this weekend, so I was going to go to Vegas to see the Stars play.
Nice.
I like doing that. Yeah, I like doing that. I've been to the playoffs the last 2 years, most of those games.
You know what surprised me? I was surprised in Tampa as well, as far as how into the game the fan base is. They're in their seats. They're ready to rock. Big organist introduction in Tampa. I mean, it's just fascinating. The other Vegas, I was surprised at the knowledge of the Vegas fan base and how into the game. Vegas, I lived there for 4.5 years. It's one of those places that, you just like to go to events just to go to events, but not hockey. I mean, that is their local team. We can talk about the Raiders, and we could talk about other teams maybe coming there, but that's a homegrown franchise, and they take great pride in that. That's the first professional franchise at the elite level that they've had, and they have embraced those guys.
Yeah, and Gary Bettman should get a lot of credit for that. Like that was his baby.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason people don't like Gary Bettman is Canadians don't like Gary Bettman, and Canadians control hockey narratives. Okay. The reason they don't like him, of course, is they're not expanding in Canada. He's taking players out of Canada. Wait, what happened to our game? What happened to our game? But people in the United States should be kissing this guy's ass in a lot of respects. Dallas has a hockey team because of Gary Bettman. There's a team in Las Vegas because of Gary Bettman. Any of the incremental progress that they've made, he's made it dealing with these, GMs who don't want to do anything differently, who, like the Canadian media, control the narrative. Oh, no. You can, hand pass in your own zone's fine to defend a goal, but you don't want to have a hand pass to score one. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Because defense is more important. Yeah, I know that. We have a best defensive forward, but not a best offensive defenseman thing. But so there's all this stuff in the bloodstream. And I think, and that's why I was so happy for Gary when Vegas won it, because he's done a ton. And yeah, you have Canadian broadcasters on your Dallas show, one for sure, and pretty sure he doesn't like them. So that's what kind of happens. So people in the States go, oh yeah, we got to boo Gary when he comes out. And sure we do. But nobody knows why they're booing him. They're just booing him. And I did their very first playoff game for Westwood One on the radio against the LA Kings. I also did that Western Conference Final Series in 2018, them with Winnipeg. And it was my line, "Welcome to Impossible," that hit every promo on every show. And I was very proud of that one. But they also had, at the very beginning, they had the community rally together with the shooting in their inaugural season. And that was the season they went to the Cup final. So people got pretty invested pretty early in that team and in that whole operation. And as you know, because you live there, there's transient folks from all over the place moved to Vegas. So a lot like Dallas. Now, how's hockey going to work in Dallas? Well, there's enough people here who understand the game and will drag the rest with us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big fan of what's happening in Vegas, and it's always fun to go see a game. If the folks haven't gone, friends, go see a game in Vegas. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. All right, 2 quickies before we let you go and promote the Substack. It's terrific. Ralph Stack, a lot of stories from the past, a lot of updates on your Dallas Stars, as Ralph's been talking about at the quarter point, giving his thoughts, giving a lot of analytics as well. So it's really, really cool. You need to subscribe to his Substack. First question for you. You talked about Vegas being a home run. We could certainly mention the Seattle Kraken as a home run. Arizona now moving to Utah. Great ownership. Looks like an early home run. Where do you think the next NHL city should be?
Should be or will be?
Well, will be or should be. Houston?
Well, again, and when you listed those things, remember that those are Gary Bettman things.
Yeah.
He hung on way too long in Arizona. I know why he did it. It's a number 5 television market in the United States. We need the market share. But after a time, even he couldn't last anymore. And he said, I'm pulling this plug now, and put him in Utah. And who knows what's going to be the future there. I would never put a team back in Glendale in a million years.
Yeah.
I would consider, because again, of the market size, if you could go Glendale adjacent, if you could go Scottsdale, if you could go, somewhere where there's at least more people, that's a possibility. I like staying in the United States. I like trying to find big markets, and Houston is as big a market as there is. I would like to go to Houston. Then you'd have a geographic rivalry for Dallas.
Yep.
And that would be very interesting. And you'd have a lot of teams in the South with an additional one. To me, there is zero reason to put another team in Canada. Zero.
Yeah.
They want to put another one in Hamilton or something with Toronto. once you get around the eminent domain stuff and splitting the fan base and all of that. And it's just to appease Canadians who think that it's their game and they should always get the next expansion team. And they don't. I loved going to Quebec. A young man in Quebec City, Gavin, them were the days, buddy boy. Them were the days. But I wouldn't put a team in there.
Yeah.
I mean, the NHL needs to grab more market share. They need more eyeballs. They need more. It's why sports betting is going to be so big. It's why some of these other things are going to be so big. And it's why you have to put teams in places that can bring you a large swath of new fans. And I think Houston's the kind of city that could do that. I don't even know if they're talking about Houston. But if it was me, I'd be looking. That's the kind of stuff I'd be looking.
Well, they do have ownership there. And the other thing that I'd say is that the Toyota Center is hockey built from the Houston Aeros. Because I was covering the Aeros, and they had their own locker room, and the ice was fine, and the fans were into it. And, you know, you'd have a AHL Calder Cup playoff game, and you draw 10, 11,000. So, you know, I think that it would work. The other thing, which a lot of people haven't talked about, is I believe then that would expand the AHL, because I believe that Houston could have the AHL city in San Antonio, very close proximity, let's just say. So I think there's certainly, you know, there's a lot that makes sense in the city of Houston. Okay, of all people, maybe Ralph Strangis, with his unique idea thinking, will agree with Gavin Spittle, and you could shut me down. Okay?
I might.
I'm not for the idea of making the games longer, elongating games. However, if there is a penalty, let's just say the game ends as soon as the penalty ends. Thoughts? In other words, there's
so we put Marchment in the box at 19:20 of the third period.
Yep.
And the game isn't over until that penalty kill is done.
Yep.
It sort of messes with the 60-minute integrity with records and those kinds of things. Listen, I like thinking about stuff. I really do. That's not, again, stretching time is different. I'm seeing a lot of this stuff today about baseball with this golden batter rule.
Yeah.
This is he's floating it. He's floating it.
Yep.
That's all he's doing. He wants to see public reaction. And I think today he found out public reaction is not behind him, but it's never behind you. When you want to make big, bold changes, it's never behind you. The reason for the shootout, the reason for the man on second base in the 10th inning, the best reason for it is a business reason. We don't want to burn our players out. They can't we can't burn bullpens out in the middle of the regular season. It's terrible. If we go into an 18-inning game on a Tuesday night in baseball, it's no good for anybody. You know, they're playing late, flights get delayed, they're coming out. And it was the same thing with hockey. It's not a philosophical debate anymore. It's, we just have to have a winner and we got to get out of there quick. Like, and that's it. So this, you know, I would like to see a couple things happen on the penalty. I'd like to see him stay in for the whole 2 minutes throughout the entire game. I think that's the thing I'd like to see. I'd like to see this, that if you ice the puck, you don't get to make changes at all. Your goaltender's out, he stays out. That's another one of those old Canadian rules. It's an old Canadian rule. Well, no, because we got to have defense. Why aren't you measuring goalie pads? Because defense is more important than offense. And this is all these rules. Like, it makes no sense to let the goal go back in the net if the rule is you can't change your players after an icing. But the GMs all say, well, we don't want it that way. And Gary says, I wish you'd reconsider. And they said, no, we don't want it that way. And that's how rules get made. So why would you want this? What would you like? Do you want that penalty to be more punitive? Do you want?
I just don't see why more teams don't take advantage with 10 seconds left, or maybe they do and they're just not being called. Like, why wouldn't I commit a penalty with 10 seconds left?
Well, you know, you could put in something that, you know, any altercation, the remaining under 2 minutes remaining in the game, the team can choose to go on the power play or a penalty shot.
Yeah.
Maybe that would fix it.
Okay.
Because then it would be more punitive and you wouldn't have to stretch the time of the game.
I feel like this is kind of interesting future Ralph Stack article.
Yes, it is.
Because
yes, it is.
I think the other one that's fascinating, and I know, we'd have to go back in time, but we could add these and it wouldn't necessarily affect games played, how playoffs aren't taken into consideration for all the series that these guys play. Why not just tack it on to total games played for their career?
Oh, make playoff games count the same as put them in with the regular stats?
Because we do put a lot of stock in 1,000 games played, 1,500 games played. And I don't really hear like, well, he played 1,000, but then look, there's 400, playoff games.
Well, but look at Jágr's games, for example, right? Like, go down and look at Jágr. Okay, if he doesn't go overseas and his career doesn't go through 4 lockouts or labor stuff, right? It's him and Gretz, and that's it. And there is no conversation. That's it. Like, and he may have even, posted totals. So, should we count every professional game that Jaromir Jágr played? Should we put his playoff stats in with his regular season stats? I'm okay with it now, kind of the way it is. But yeah, I understand. Bookkeepers are very, you know how accountants are? That's what this kind of stuff is. They're not going to want to do anything that has to let them explain that now they have to add an asterisk in the books on, okay, now we've qualified all of this. There's a lot of little rules that I would consider tweaking for sure. I think here, how about this one for me? Okay. The first tiebreak for playoffs is goals scored.
Oh, okay.
Here's why. It doesn't change the game on the ice. But when you look at, metrics on what happens to a hockey game early in the third in a 2-2 game or a 3-2 game.
Yeah.
People they stop playing.
Yeah.
So how do you encourage continuing to play? How do you incentivize continuing to play without changing major rules in the game? And to me, that's one that you could do. You could say, okay, the very first tiebreak, forget the rows. Jesus, the rows. Forget the rows. Forget the other shit. The very first tiebreak is goals scored. So guys, score some goals.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. And what if they went back kind of old school, whereas, not go back to ties, but encourage overtime goals more than shootouts? In other words, what we're seeing now is puck possession and teams not wanting to give up the puck. And, it's very exciting over time. But if there was a little bit more encouragement as far as, hey, you're going to get an extra point if you did this, I think we'd probably see more overtime wins compared to shootouts.
Well, I would, look, I would, again, this to me is not philosophical anymore. It's business reasons.
Mm-hmm.
For me, we got to end games. We got to figure out a way to decide games. I think the bullshit of shootout wins not counting the same as overtime wins is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just ridiculous. Like, they talk, well, just skills competition. Well, you know what? You ever watch the NFL? You ever see him drag a 5'10" guy out at the end of a game and a guy puts his finger on top of a ball and he kicks it between 2 orange posts? That's a skills competition.
Yeah.
You ever watch the NBA when they go to the free throw line and the clock doesn't run and nobody's guarding them? That's a skills competition. Okay. We have this everywhere. This is old school hockey GMs. Well, it can't be worth that much. Now I want you to do something else. I want everybody to look at the standings. There's only one because I looked today. There's only one where, because it's kind of early, it doesn't play, but points don't matter. Wins do. You look at the standings and just look at the win total. Don't look at anything else. Look at the win total, and it almost always lines up exactly the same way. You don't have to follow the points. You follow the wins. Like, the only one, I think it was Winnipeg that had 18, and then the team above the Minnesota has 16 or something. But other than that, and it's because of the ties and stuff, you look, or the overtime points, but you look, it's always in every division, 16, 15, 13, 12, 11, 10. And that's how it looks. And then the points are, well, you need another point. Forget the points. Win, you lose, that's it. If you don't like shootouts, play in overtime. Don't let it get to don't hold the puck in your own zone for a minute and a half, throwing it around, right?
Yeah.
That's how I would do it. And then in the playoffs, now you're really going to be mad at me. In the playoffs, after 2 overtimes, we go to the shootout. That's
really
it. Because Yeah, because you're killing the teams. You know how many 5 overtime, 3, 4, 5 overtime games?
I agree with you there.
Series are so different after that. And the 3rd overtime or 4th overtime of a playoff game is horseshit.
Yeah.
It's guys dragging themselves up and down the ice. It's going to be a mistake. It's going to be, and then whoever loses that game is shattered. And generally they don't win the playoff. They don't win the series. I think there's great evidence to support that it's probably in everybody's best interest to think about moving that too. It's just horrible to watch. I can't watch 3 or 4 overtime playoff. There's only been the Stars Sharks in 2008, the Brendan Morrow game, game 6. That one needed to go as long as it needed to go. The one in Buffalo with the Stars and the Hasek, no, not really. Like, it was a shitty game. It was a bad game. I remember on the air in like the 2nd overtime, Razor saying this. He said, this game is only compelling because it's for the Stanley Cup. Otherwise, this isn't a very good hockey game. And it wasn't. It was a bad hockey game. We've had a lot of great hockey games that go 2 or 3 overtimes, but to me, it's just, you're just risking too many things, and it's a bad product, I think. So anyway, when you start being all these rules, and listen, you can have a hand pass in your own zone, you can have a hand pass in the offensive zone. There's no difference. It's stupid. Do you know why we don't allow
high
players
stick
to knock
above
the
the
puck
shoulder? Yeah. Why is that?
with their high stick? Do you know why?
Is it safety?
Because no, we got a penalty for that. You hit them, we got a penalty. That's safety. Because GMs and coaches are former 3rd and 4th line players, and they can't make that play. And they don't want to give skill any more advantages. I'm telling you, that's what this is. It's so deep in the bloodstream here that when it just looks stupid. It's like, well, wait a minute. Because you watch guys who can play it out of the air and then go in. It's a skill guy. It's a guy with high-level skill. Connor McDavid can do it. Let him do it. If he touches a player with a stick, it's a penalty. All the same rules apply, and we don't lose anything with it, and we keep flow of the game. Again, there is no reason not to let that happen, I think. But
I think it's an amazing
now you
gift.
got me on my passionate subject.
I'm just going to tell Stars fans, what an amazing gift to sign up for Ralph's Substack. This has been so good, and
Thank you.
I love that you're absolutely unleashed in a good way. And that you're basically talking about this organization that you have worked so closely with, but also talking about the NHL, and then also talking about broadcast stories from the past, but also current broadcasting situations. We've touched on a lot of those points. So the Substack is called Ralph Stack, and it is absolutely terrific. And you are a fountain of information. I absolutely love what you brought to the table. This Spittle Strangis chemistry is not bad.
Oh, what what the hell, man? Yeah. Let's keep doing it. Call me at the half pole.
I will call you at the half pole, and we will have you back on. The greatness of Ralph Strangis, everybody, on this episode of Spits and Suds. Thank you, sir, once again.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. You can reach him at Ralph Strangis on Twitter/X, and you can also subscribe to his Substack at Ralph Stack. That's going to do it for another edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle. Have a great day, everyone.